This audio is best experienced with headphones. Hello there, stranger. Welcome back to my little corner of the internet. I am the Laughing Rook, and as always, it is a pleasure to have you. Today's read is a fiendish exploration into the power of persuasion. Take a seat. Join me by the fire. Written by Reddit user KLNRyan13, our story today: Archer's Deal. I knew, from the start of the drive, that I was a fool for going. The feeling intensified along the drive to Johnson's diner. The glowing lights of the city flashed in my face as I drove through a side street, headed downtown. I had a deal to close. My hair stood on end as I crossed the city. I glanced into an alleyway and saw somebody getting mugged. The thought to call 911 never crossed my mind. I kept driving, trying to keep my hands steady against the wheel. There was a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest. My eyes were sore and starting to automatically close. I used what little brain power I had left to keep them pried open. At the upcoming intersection, the lights turned yellow, warning me to slow. I kept driving at the same speed. I didn't process the colors. When they flashed red, a surge of adrenaline woke me up. I slammed a foot down onto the brake and avoided a collision with the traffic as it crossed. One more right turn, and I would be at Johnson's. I almost forgot to use my blinker as I waited for a car to pass, and then turned and sped down the street. I saw a man walking down the sidewalk, shaking violently. His eyes were wide, skin a purplish, sickened shade. He yelled something to me as I passed, a vein bulging out of his forehead. I had seen him once or twice, stumbling downtown, and he was almost always tweaking. This was him on a good day. A few shivers crawled down my spine. My stomach squirmed. I wondered if there was still time for me to turn my car around. There was plenty. But then I remembered that there wasn't time for me to turn my life around, and it kept me on the same path, headed towards Johnson's diner just before midnight. I started to brake as I came upon the building. Its red neon lights on the front door still read "Open" in all capital letters. The blue cursive writing in lights above it flickered once or twice. The windows were dusty. A man stood on the front, smoking a cigarette. The smoke burned in my nostrils when I realized I had left the car's window rolled down. I made a note to close it before locking the car and getting out. I walked up the concrete steps to the glass door, ignoring the man who stood there. I pushed it open, and the bells inside the diner clattered and rang. The lights inside were dimmed. Long shadows stretched along the various dining areas. I thought there might be a worker cleaning the tables. Nobody was there. I looked to the front desk for a manager, or at least an employee of some kind. Nothing but a brick wall behind the desktop and a lone computer sitting on it. It projected light from the screen, and when I looked at it from an angle, I didn't see anything except a search bar. Just as I thought to call out and ask for an employee, I heard a low, thick voice utter something to me.
"You must be Will Parsons."
I spun around. The tone was regal, as if a king had spoken to me, or maybe a politician or lawyer. It sent a chill rushing down my spine. There was a soft ringing in my ears, not enough to stop my hearing entirely. "Hello?" I asked. The sound of a footstep, clipping along the tile floor. Then there was another step, a third following that. With the fourth, a figure dressed in a black suit and red tie appeared from around the corner. He had jet black hair, fluffy and combed perfectly into a pompadour hairstyle. He had sharp cheekbones and a strong jawline, with brown eyes that twinkled with a sly, businessman-like vibe. He had a coy smile plastered on his face, pearly white teeth visible just underneath the lips.
"Oh, hello,"
I said, chewing on the inside of my cheek.
Come along. We can sit down.
The man smirked. I nodded my head, listening to the sound of my shoes as they clopped like horses' hooves along the linoleum underneath me. The man walked towards a booth in the back. I followed him, sitting across from him. He sat leaned forwards, hands cupped and placed on the table. I folded my arms, then cleared my throat.
You know my name, correct?
The man questioned. I shook my head no.
"Wasn't given to me,"
I replied.
David Archer.
He extended his hand. I grabbed it firmly and shook. His grip seemed to overpower mine. His dark eyes appeared thin, almost snake-like in the dim light of the diner.
So, as I understand, you're buried deep under $60,000 of debt. You need to pay it off as soon as possible.
I nodded. Archer chuckled to himself.
We can make arrangements.
"What do I have to do?"
I asked. Archer chuckled again, his thick voice like a bubble of dread wrapping around me.
How much are you willing to do?
He questioned. I saw 1,000 different futures, all of them ending at a brick wall covered in splattered organs and blood. I swallowed.
"Anything,"
I uttered, under my breath. His thin smile grew wider.
Shake on it.
I reached a trembling hand over the table towards Archer. His smile was at its widest. It was somewhat crazed now, and it made my stomach run in circles.
Now,
Archer placed a hand on the table and the other above it.
let's talk business. There's something big I'm going to have to ask of you, but I know you need those $60,000, don't you?
I gave him a long stare down.
You love your wife, don't you?
He asked, grinning.
What's her name? Kathy, isn't it?
I gasped.
"How do you know her? What have you done to her?"
I slammed my fists down on the table, leaning across and grimacing in his face. The urge to sit back down washed over me. I lowered, with caution, back into my place. Archer still held the same facial expression. The smile would not waver.
Nothing has been done to her. You love your wife, don't you?
Keeping my lips in a tight frown, I shook my head up and down.
Good. Would you ever do anything to hurt her?
"What game are you playing here, Archer?"
Do you care about your family?
I leaned forward, took a deep breath, and kept my words at a slow rate, as to not spit into his face.
"Tell me, in exact words, not any puzzles, not any games, what I am supposed to do for you."
Archer chuckled a few times, gesturing at me with his hand.
I need you to kill your wife,
he said, with a smile. The entire world began to spin around me in broad, wild circles. I almost snapped at him, but staring into his eyes I felt paralyzed. All of the vigor and all of the fight seemed to leave my body. Replacing it was a thick, crawling feeling throughout me. Time stopped, and my heart throbbed.
"We are done here,"
I said, standing up from my seat like a rocket launching. There was a voice in my head that didn't speak, but signaled for me to sit back down. I lowered myself back into the booth like I was going to sit on a landmine. Archer's face taunted me, and I felt something inside of me begin to wither out and die.
Please, listen to the voice of reason.
The voice of bullshit, I thought.
Think of the kids. Your son, Kyle, right? Every day he comes to you and asks if you can get a puppy. A Labrador Retriever, he always says. And you give him the old, "Daddy has a lot of work to do, and money is tight right now," type speech. The one every parent has to give. And it breaks their heart the more they have to give it. Aren't you tired of having to give that speech?
I processed what he said and let it seep into my mind. Then I nodded my head. Still, I felt like I might reach over and punch him, but there was a subconscious part of me that believed my hand wouldn't move, even if I tried to attack him.
And what of your daughter? Her name is Sarah. Sarah Eileen Parsons. Isn't that a pretty name? You picked her middle name yourself. Kathy decided Kyle's, didn't she?
Keep talking,
I said. Archer chuckled.
Sarah never begs for anything. She seems to be better than that, doesn't she? It's funny. You spend more time with her than your son. Shouldn't every father teach his son how to mow the lawn? How to catch? How to shake hands?
I heard a million responses forming in my head, but I held my tongue. Shouldn't every father teach his son how to mow the lawn?
You know everything.
My voice trembled, the breath in my lungs running out.
What are you?
I asked. Archer chuckled, though it sounded closer to a tiger growling. The crazed grin held firm. I uncrossed my arms. Archer leaned forwards and his smile grew mere millimeters wider.
What? What am I?
I nodded my head, mouth gaping.
Don't you mean who?
There was a long pause.
I know you aren't a who.
Archer continued to smile. He flashed one last menacing, malice-packed grin and reached his hand out for a shake.
So do we have our deal?
I frowned, leaving his hand out in the air. Archer got closer into my face and I could smell his breath, minty, with a hint of metallic, sour blood. A chill coursed down my spine. His eyes were yellowing around the pupils, slowly changing colors. He didn't have to say anything. It wasn't until that moment that I truly realized the power and promise of a handshake. Thank you for listening to this reading. It certainly commanded my attention, almost more than I bargained for. Remember to like and subscribe to see more such content suggested to you in future. If you'd like to leave an upvote for Kale and Ryan 13's story on the Nosleep subreddit, there is a link in the description. If you'd like to join my Discord server and submit something to read or make a suggestion for a future video, there's a link for that too. There is always more to come, so please, stay tuned. I'm the Laughing Rook, and you've been a most welcome visitor. Until next time, friend.